Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to TCTAP 2020 Satellite Symposium sponsored by Medtronic Korea. The title of this session is Latest Update of Drug-Coated Balloon Technology. I'm Young-Guk Go from the Severance Hospital, Seoul, Korea. It's my great pleasure to chair this session. And my co-chair is Dr. Jae-Hwan Won from Aju University Hospital, Korea. Dr. Won, could you say hello to audience?
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm sorry. Now I am infected with COVID-19, so my voice is changed. Now I am in home quarantine. Sorry. Okay. Take care, everybody.
Okay. In this session, we have two lectures, and after two lectures, we're going to have a Q&A and discussion time for 10 minutes. So I'd like to introduce the first speaker. The first speaker is Dr. Gunnar Tepe from Germany, Romed Klinikum Rosenheim, Germany. Dr. Gunnar Tepe is well-known radiologist and a specialist for DCB and other peripheral interventions. And the title of his session is Impact Global Registry 5-Year Clinical Outcomes in VIVA 2021. Dr. Tepe, please.
So thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen right now. My name is Gunnar Tepe from the Romed Clinic Rosenheim in Germany, and it's a pleasure for me to present you insights from the Impact DCB clinical program updates from the Impact Global study. Especially, we are talking about the pre-specified cohorts. In addition to that, I'm going to talk about paclitaxel safety updates. I'd like to thank everybody on behalf of the study group. I'll try to advance. Yeah, it worked. So first of all, I'm going to give you a background of the study, then a summary of the Impact SFA and Impact Global full cohort, and then updates of the Impact Global study and these pre-specified cohorts, instant restenosis, CTO, and long lesions. Now, the background is the treatment of peripheral artery disease in patients with multiple comorbidities is really challenging, and it remains a global health concern impacting more than 200 million people worldwide. So this is really a problem. So drug-coated balloons emerged as a novel endovascular treatment option a decade ago, so that's 10 years ago. And it is shown in randomized controlled trials, and a lot of trials, and then also in meta-analysis, that these DCBs have superior outcomes compared to normal PTA. So patients with more complex lesions, such as instant restenosis, long lesions longer than 15 centimeters, and CDOs are usually excluded from those randomized controlled trials. In this case, the global studies do help, and currently there are no long-term data available for DCBs of those patients which have really long lesions or instant restenosis. And I'm going to present you these results within the next few minutes. Now, this slide is a nice summary of the Impact DCB studies. On the left-hand side, you see the randomized controlled trials. And first of all, we started with small studies. Then we had the Impact SFA study, which was a US-European randomized controlled trial in order also to get the approval in the US. Then we have had Impact Japan and Impact China. On the right-hand side, you see that what I'm going to talk about later on is the real-world studies. There is the very big Impact Global studies with pre-specified cohorts, long lesion, instant restenosis, and CTOs. And then we have also regional subgroups from Belgium and from Asia. Now, this slide nicely summarizes the 5-year outcome of both, on the left-hand side, the randomized trials, and here the Impact Global study. Now, Here in the randomized trial, of course, we compare with normal PTA, and we see that at 5 years in the DCB arm, we have a freedom from clinical-driven target lesion revascularization of 74.5%. So that means that only 1 out of 4 patients had in the DCB arm a re-PTA to be done within 5 years. In the PTA group, it was less, it was 65%, and this was significantly different. On the right-hand side, you see the 5-year outcome of the IMPACT Global studies, and you see that in the DCBs, we have a clinical-driven TLR rate of 69.4%. And of course, these are more complex lesions. And on the right-hand side, you also see the drop-off over the time. But if you see in clinical reality, with it's really all comers, every patient's long lesions, everything, also even CLI patients, the DCB really did great. Now, if we look into the mortality rate, that's freedom from all-cause mortality, that's everything. We see that 10% of the patients in the randomized trial died within 10 years. And because there were no exclusion criteria in the IMPACT Global study, about 20% of those patients died within 5 years. Now, this slide summarizes the study itself. It was a real-world prospective multi-center single-arm trial, independently adjudicated, and it had an effectiveness and a safety endpoint. There were clinical cohorts and imaging cohorts. Clinical cohorts with 1,406 subjects, and also patients who received long DCBs. And on the right-hand side, we already pre-specified imaging cohorts. So they had an imaging and ultrasound at 1 year with a core lab, and this was instant restenosis, long lesions, and CTOs. In the follow-up, then until 5 years, there were no ultrasound studies done, but there was a clinical follow-up, and also the CDTLRs were counted. Now, we are looking right now in the IMPACT Global study, that really big study, and the pre-specified cohorts. And we see that diabetes was not seen so often, like 1/3, a little bit more, up to 40%. But hypertension was very present in the patients, and also elevated cholesterol levels. According to additional baseline characteristics, we see that most of the patients were classified rather for 3, 60%, around 60%. A lot of patients had also concomitant BTK disease, as you see over here, but also there were also patients with CLI in that group. According the lesion characteristics, of course, in the instant group, every patient was restenotic, but in the other groups, de novo lesions were in between 83 and 92%. So this was the majority. So according to the lesion lengths, longest lesion, of course, were seen in the long lesion group, but also in CTO were very long. So 26, 23 centimeter, this is very long. In the instant restenosis, the lesion length with 17 centimeters was a little bit shorter. So occlusion was seen also very often in the long lesion group, in the CTO group. If we go to calcification, severe calcification, so calcification was seen in a lot of patients, especially in those with long lesions and CTOs, and severe calcification rate was especially seen in the long lesion group, 20%, versus the other group. It was not so often seen here. So the primary patency was good in all groups, and it's very interesting to also talk about provisional stent rate. The stent rate was quite low in the instant restenosis, 13%. In the long lesions, it was almost 40%, and almost 50% in the CTO. So the stenting rate, even we used GCB, was in that challenging cohort quite high, especially in the CTOs, but please note this was only spot staining, not whole lesion coverage. So these are the 5-year outcomes, effectiveness outcomes, and you see long lesions in CTOs did very well, as also instant restenosis. There is a slight drop off here, especially in between the 1 and 2 year time frame, but the curve flattens out here. Very good result in especially long lesions in CTOs, almost 70%. A little bit less good results, but still good in instant restenosis. But we have to note that instant restenosis, after 5 years, almost every second patient had to be seen again to receive target lesion revascularization. So that's a different group. Now, if we look to additional effectiveness outcomes, we can also express this as time to first TLR. In instant restenosis, this was 1,350 days, 1,400 and 1,500 days in long lesions and CTOs. So this is the all-cause death rate through 5 years with additional vital status. And we see that instant restenosis, approximately 20% of the patient died within the 5-year time frame, versus on long lesions and CTOs was a little bit higher. And this also reflects, especially in long lesions and CTOs, the general disease state. So this patient have more atherosclerosis anywhere else in the body. So in summary, real-world data from IMPACT Global Study continues to confirm long-term clinical safety and effectiveness of the IMPACT Admiral drug-coated balloon, also in complex lesion. And we've seen high 5-year freedom from clinical-driven TLR in pre-specified cohorts, CTO around 70%, 67% long lesions, and 58% in de novo instant restenosis. And there were no safety issues were reported in any of the cohorts. All-cause mortality with VTL studies at 5 years was 81.4% in de novo instant restenosis, long lesions 75% and 78% in CTO. So in summary, these data support incorporating the use of the IMPACT Admiral DCB into clinical treatment algorithm, also for complex femoral popliteal disease. So this was the first part of my talk, and the second part is on safety updates. And this has been discussed intensively in our country and around the world. I'll give you some background, recent evidence, and also an update on paclitaxel and amputation. So paclitaxel devices, as this drug-coated balloon, as we talked about, have consistently shown improved efficacy versus conventional devices in randomized trials over 10 years right now. Nevertheless, in 2018, Casanos reported in a meta-analysis an increased risk of late mortality of those patients who were treated with paclitaxel devices compared to those who were treated with non-paclitaxel coated devices. So because of that, the FDA conducted an advisory panel meeting in June 2019 and issued letters to healthcare providers in January 2019, March 19, and so on. And also global regulators and societies issued their own statements and also their own leading comments according how DCBs should be used in the future. Since that time, a lot of more data became available, and I'm going to share you those data right now. So this was the start. I was talking about the Casanos paper. The first conference was the LINC conference in Leipzig, and we all discussed about those data later on, and then also the FDA letters. Right now, you see this time frame, a lot of more years went down the road and more data came in, and I'm going to report on those data. And these are the data, lots of data sets which came in and which were looking really into the safety of DCBs. Now, the first study which came out was the so-called SweetPET study published in December 2020. It is a multi-center randomized trial comparing paclitaxel versus non-paclitaxel devices in the treatment of lower extremity peripheral artery disease. An interim analysis was done in response to the Data Safety Monitoring Board to determine the risk of mortality. And in this study, 2,289% subjects were enrolled with a mean time follow-up of 2.5 years. And for those patients, 100% of vital status follow-up was available. If you look on the right-hand side, you might have done this already. You see there isn't any difference between drug-coated and uncoated balloon, not in the overall population, and also not in the CNI group and not in the colloidicant group. So the first publication, the SweetPET, which really showed no increased risk of death, even for follow-up until 4 years. Now, there was a very, very big other data set published in 2021. That's what the SAFE PAD, looking at 168,500 patients. That's really, really a big number. And this data set is based on the Medicare data set, which were done on patients between April 2015 and 2018. And for those patient cohorts, we have an over 99% completeness of Medicare free service mortality risk records, and also subset analysis were performed. Again, looking to the right-hand side, you see that here, not any difference between drug-coated balloons and no drug-coated balloon according the risk to die over the time period in a very high number of patients. Nevertheless, in the subcore, in the closer look for several subgroups, for all subgroups, according to the outcome of clinical patency and also follow-up, the drug-coating balloon was favored. Now, another study is the Optum study published in September 2021, looking at 16,790 patients from Medicare. Again, a high completeness of free for service mortality rate and ACC here. Again, no significant difference between the group. Again, a very high patient number. And in Europe, we had another study, the Voyager study, which was not designed to look at DCB and non-DCB patients. It was designed to look on the performance of rivaroxaban versus placebo, but nevertheless, in that really good controlled studies, also patients were treated either with the DCB or with uncoated devices. We had 4,379 patients, a very high complete vital status, EC educated and so on. Again, you see not any significant difference between drug-coated and non-drug-coated patients. Nevertheless, there was a clinical benefit for the drug-coated patients rather than the undrug-coated treated patients. And then at least there was also a meta-analysis published in June 2021 showing that the drug-coated devices were safe. So this really is a summary of everything with a hazard ratio or increased risk shown actually in the first data sets. This is the Katsanos paper. But as more data we had, as more patients we had, and these are independent data, and these are the real-world studies, and also the number of patients. You see the number of patients is really huge over here. No increased risk could be shown anymore. So another thing which was brought up by Katsanos is that those paclitaxel-coated devices might increase the amputation risk. What he did actually is he took again randomized trials which were available at first, and took those data and did an analysis. But the problem here again is the methodology, and of that paper. And because of that, there were also other analyses done from Szymanski, for instance, and from Hess here, from the Voyager data, again showing no increased risk of amputation of patients who received drug-coated balloons either in the SFA or below the knee arteries. So in conclusion, according to the paclitaxel safety, all independent analyses to date have provided evidence of no more mortality difference between patients who were treated with paclitaxel-coated devices compared to conventional devices, so no increased mortality. The more recent Katsanos paper reporting a linkage between paclitaxel and amputation was also followed by other groups, and we could also not show any increase of amputation rate. So in the meantime, the FDA has continued to soften their position, but they are far from all clear sign. So continuous efforts to the PAN industry, that every company is involved here who provides drug-coated balloons, provides the best opportunity for addressing any problems and any FDA questions and any other potential factors for associated mortality. So thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much for the excellent presentation. Dr. Won, could you introduce the next speaker?
Okay, I'd like to introduce the next speaker. Next speaker is Dr. Kimura from Kyoto Daiichi Red Cross Hospital, Japan. He will talk about the clinical data and experience of impact DCB from Japan. Dr. Kimura, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Masayoshi Kimura from Kyoto First Red Cross Hospital, Japan. I'm glad to have this valuable opportunity to give a presentation here. Thank you very much for this opportunity. My title today is the Clinical Data and Experience of Impact DCB from Japan. I have nothing to disclose. Today, in the former half, talking about the clinical data from Japan, mainly about Impact SFA Japan. The latter half talks about our own case-based clinical experience. Here is the overview of Impact SFA Japan. This is the first LCT of DCB in the Asian population with midterm outcomes. It assesses the key safety and efficacy of impact alveoli for de novo and non-stented listen-less lesions in the SFA and proximal pop as compared to treatment with standard PTA. Prospective, multicenter, randomized, single-blinded trial, 100 subjects enrolled. The primary effectiveness endpoint is primary patency at 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. Defined as freedom from clinical-driven target lesion dislocation and freedom from stenosis are defined by duplex sound, PSVR 2.4. The primary safety endpoint is freedom from device and procedure-related death through 30 days, and freedom from target limb major amputation, and critical-driven TLR within 3 years. Here are key inclusion and exclusion criteria. The patient with intermediate claudication and less pain were enrolled, and ischemic ulcer and ganglions were excluded. Lesions were de novo and non-stented restenotic in the FSA and proximal pop. And stenotic lesion between 4 to 20 cm and occluded lesions under 10 cm were enrolled. Patient characteristics were shown here. Almost patients were claudicated. Lesion characteristics shown in this slide. Almost all cases were de novo lesions. The mean length was about 9 cm. About 15% of patients were CTO lesions. So procedural characteristics are shown here. A provisional stent was 3 to 4%. This is affected by Japanese health insurance system. Any stent do not reimburse to bail out severe dissection when using any DCB in peripheral intervention. Moreover, these patients were enrolled just after successful dilatation, so dissection grade type A to C or no dissection in the treated lesions. The primary patency is significantly higher in the impact group compared with PTA group. And freedom from TLRs was about 85% at 3 years. From a safety point of view, there were no difference between two groups concerning all cause of death, limb amputation, and thrombosis. Here is a summary of Impact SFA Japan 1, 2, 3 years. Results as shown: primary patency, freedom from TLR, and all cause of death are consistent with other DCB trials in Asia. Let's move on to our clinical experience. First of all, I'm talking about SFA devices available in Japan. Just a few years ago, we have mainly focused how to open the target lesions, antegrade approach, retrograde approach, re-entry device, and so on. And in Japan, we could use bare metal stent or a simple balloon dilatation. Today we can choose many finalizing devices in our daily practice. So now we mainly discussed which device should we use, how to keep it open. So now in Japan, we can use a covered nitrogen stent, an internal stent, and these have no drug technology. And also we can use drug-eluting stent, a Zilver or Elvir, and DCB, 3 DCBs, Impact Rotaryx Ranger. Of course, we should choose the best finalizing devices depending on the situation. We should choose best finalizing device considering these patients and lesion characteristics, such as long CTO, severe calcification, small vessel, and so on. Here is our basic treatment strategy for FP lesions. After successful Gallagher crossing, we perform aggressive lesion preparation with a super non-compliant balloon or a chocolate balloon. For the last 6 months, we have usually used chocolate balloon. A chocolate balloon is an exclusively unique balloon. It could minimize vessel dissection and good lesion dilatation due to specific groove and pillow structure. If the vessel ruptured, which is covered natural stent, a severe dissection and acute recoil with severe calcification with thrombus, drug-eluting stent implantation. Across the popliteal joint, interwoven stent. Without acute recoil and severe dissection, we choose a DCB impact dilatation. In Japan, any aspirectomy devices has not been available, So aggressive lesion preparation with a chocolate balloon and a drug-coated balloon impact admiral is very effective strategy. Here is a brief summary of our clinical result of impact admiral. The number is 176 and 34% was a CTO and the mean length was about 14 centimeters. About half of patients were CLI and a half of patients are on hemodialysis patients. Among these patients and lesion characteristics, the freedom from TLR was shown in the right side of this slide. 2 years freedom from TLR was about 80%. We accept these results considering with severe patients and lesion characteristics. Finally, I will show a representative case using the chocolate balloon and impact admiral performed just a week ago in our institution. The case was a 70-year-old female, Rutherford class 3. The target lesion was left SFA diffuse stenosis. The angiogram showed a diffuse stenosis in the left SFA without severe calcification. So OFDI imaging was performed from the distal SFA to CFA. The connection of OFDI catheter is not good, so sorry for poor imaging in this slide. To remove the red cells during the OFDI imaging, we usually use balloon-assisted guiding catheter optimal, which generally used a carotid artery stenting. We could see the plaque and vessel structure in the detail. So we predial with 6 mm chocolate balloon. It could pass the region smoothly with 14-inch guide wire support like this. This movie shows that a chocolate balloon can gradually dilate the target region like this. So gradually dilated. My impression of chocolate balloon is a Japanese sweet, kuzukiri. It's like a noodle. So kuzukiri was made by this device, pushing soft, sweet kuzu material through this mesh gradually. So chocolate brown has a mesh structure like this, and the same phenomenon might be happening in the target region. It might be reduced vessel dissection to distribute the rotation force through the mesh. So the same rotation could be seen in the proximal SFL region, like this. Here is the angiogram just after chocolate balloon dilatation. Successful dilatation without severe dissection and a short segment dissection in the distal SFA. So OFDI showed unique plaque dilatation, which remained chocolate balloon pillow and groove structure. OFDI can detect tiny dissection, which cannot see by angiogram, like this, pillow and groove. So impact admiral 5 150 and 6 120 were inflated in the whole SFA region. The final angiogram showed excellent rotation with any slow flow and short segment dissection, which did not need provisional stenting in our daily practice. No slow flow. The OFDI images after DCB dilatation revealed paclitaxel attachment, white little materials on the vessel wall. In conclusion, aggressive lesion dilatation with chocolate balloon and impact dilatation is a good treatment option for SFA intervention. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Kimura, for your wonderful lecture. Okay, I'd like to open the discussion session. Is there any question from panelists?
We have 4 panelists, Dr. Ik-chun Choi, and Soon Kim, and Manon Park, and Sang-woo Park. So, has anybody comments about the 2 lectures? Yeah, Dr. Park, Manon Park.
I have a question to Dr. Tepe. First of all, congrats, a very good, very nice result on your work. My question is that recently the result of the sirolimus coated DCB data of the sirolimus coated DCB were reported in terms of ISR lesion, comparing the paclitaxel eluting DCB. The result looks quite promising. So, how do you think about that? It can be sirolimus eluting stent can be a game changer, or what would be a strong point of the paclitaxel eluting DCB compared with the sirolimus eluting DCB in terms of mechanism or clinical data, please?
Yeah, thank you very much for this great question. Yeah, these data you were talking about are coronary data, for instance, restenosis, and of course only limited patient number and limited time to follow up. I think yes, the sirolimus coated devices are very interesting, also for peripheral artery disease. But they have to prove that they're as effective. So first of all, why should we use sirolimus-coated balloons? We should use them or might use them because the other device, paclitaxel, is a risk. But this is not the fact as far as we can see. So right now, I think in peripheral arteries, there is not the pressure really to change from paclitaxel into a sirolimus because there is no risk of amputation or a higher death rate. In addition to that, sirolimus-coated balloons are much more difficult to build. And what happens right now? What happens is that the difference of the efficacy of such balloons might be seen in long term. So we need more data and more long-term data. Currently, we are participating in a study, peripheral study, with more than 400 patients. So the so-called Sirona trial, comparing a sirolimus-coated balloon versus paclitaxel-coated balloons of different brands. But we have to await these results. This is the SFA. The story BTK is totally different because in BTK, we have paclitaxel-coated devices, and some had good results, others not so good results. And I think also if we look into the stents, drug-coated stents with sirolimus and paclitaxel, we have to state that sirolimus-coated stents had a good performance. Versus paclitaxel had not such a good performance. So I think BTK, it might have a different role compared to the SFA, but the way until those devices will make it is quite long.
Yeah, Dr. Choi.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Choi from Kansas University of Korea. I have also question to Dr. Tepe. Do you think that the dose of the paclitaxel or releasing time made a difference in the other study results between paclitaxel coated device?
Can you repeat the question? Which is the difference you were talking about?
The paclitaxel dose and releasing time make a difference.
Okay, thank you very much for this question. Yeah, I think the dose is something which is important, and everybody talks about lower dose, also reducing a potential risk. But I do think that more dose might be even more effective, and we've done animal results with Professor Speck, who's really the inventor of the drug-coated balloons, and he has shown that the efficacy in higher dose is even better compared to the lower dose. And I think that right now we have one dose only for every patient, for every situation, like if we take the impact balloon. But I don't think that this one dose is okay for every lesion. So, for instance, if we have an instant restenosis, that's totally different. If we have a restenosis compared to the normal lesion, it's totally different. And I personally think that those patients with, for instance, instant restenosis or even calcification might demand a higher dose. And what we've done actually in order to enhance the efficacy, we went in with 2 DCBs, the same location. So for instance, for instant restenosis, if I see an instant restenosis and you've seen the data of the IMPACT Global trial, and there are other data also available, which show that the DCB does really better than PTA after 1 and 2 years, but after 3 years, there might be a catch-up phenomenon. But if we go in with the DCB at a double dose, you might solve the problem. So I don't think even it's kind of like under the risk assessment of death model to talk about low dose devices. I think that for special patients, we even need higher dose devices or go in with the DCB 2 times.
Yeah, Dr. Sang-Ho Park.
I have one question for Dr. Tepe. I don't believe mortality signal from local DCB treatment. So is there any causal explanation other than synthetic data from meta-analysis for incidentally detected mortality signal in meta-analysis associated with paclitaxel?
I think from that analysis, it's just we were looking at the death rate but we don't have any comparison with the control group. We just can compare with historic data, but the death rate is quite low, especially in instant restenosis. You've seen that it's even lower than compared to CTOs and long lesions.
Okay. Yeah, Dr. Wang.
I have one question to Dr. Kimura. According to your presentation, provisional stenting rate is very, very low, only 4.4%.
Yes.
Considering of short lesion and mild lesion, that is very amazing data. Could you explain the reason why?
Explain what?
The low rate of provisional stenting.
Low rate of provisional stenting rate.
Oh, mainly Japanese insurance system affected this low percentage because any bailout stenting reimbursed in Japanese. So we choose a region to use a DCB. So we after successful predilatation with small dissection, we choose a DCB. And if the lesion has a severe dissection, we put a stent or so. So in this study, Impact SFA Japan, a successful pre-dilatation randomized control of bus enrolled. So the probability rate are very low. It's mainly because of the study design.
Okay. Sorry, another question to Dr. Kimura. Chocolate balloon is not available in Korea, so I'm curious about the chocolate balloon is work in heavily calcified lesion.
Yes, that's a good question. So just 6 months ago, we can available chocolate balloon. So I have the same question. So my now question answer is yes, very effective in the heavily calcified lesions. So when almost all cases we choose a chocolate balloon, even if it had a heavy calcified or no. So IBUS or OFDI images show the excellent lesion dilatation with chocolate balloon.
Okay, thank you.
Kim?
Yeah, I have a question to Dr. Kimura. Thank you for your great lecture. I have simple questions. In my center, we don't have the chocolate balloon, as previously doctors mentioned, but sometimes we use the cutting balloon for the lesion modifications. In your opinions, which is better for using the lesion modification between the cutting balloon versus the chocolate balloon?
Thank you. Yes, we can use a cutting balloon and a chocolate balloon in Japan, but we cannot use any aspectomy devices. In your country, you can use aspectomy devices also. So a cutting balloon is also effective in the calcification region or avoid the dissection, but the profile is a little bit larger than the chocolate balloon. So chocolate balloon can use 5 French or 6 French teeth, but a cutting balloon needs 6 or 7 French teeth. So the efficacy is almost equal detecting by the IBUS or OFDI images. So the raw profile is a good advantage to the chocolate balloon.
Okay. Dr. Won and I participated in the Impact Global Registry study, and we are also about to submit the Asian subset data. So the result of the Asian subset data is also similar to the whole entire cohort data. So but in general, in Korea, the DCB is much more favored than the DS. So is that the same trend in Europe or in Japan, or do you have any other different strategy?
Yeah. Well, when I can answer first, so it really depends in which country you go, and actually it also depends on reimbursement. For instance, in France, the DS is reimbursed and the DCB, at least in the past, was not reimbursed. Here in Germany, we have the DCB reimbursed and the DS is not reimbursed. So this drives also the treatment algorithm. That's one thing. Just if I would take this away, I would say, if possible, in general, I would really try to do a case without a stent, also without a DS. So right now, what I do in long lesions, for instance, I pre-dilate, and if I see it's a really severe dissection and I will need stents, I use the DS first. And if I see, okay, it's looking quite fine, and I might come out with not a lot of stent or no stent, I go with a DCB and then spot stent with an uncoated stent. That's my strategy.
Okay. How about the situation in Japan? So how is the preference between DCB and DS? Dr. Kimura? Could you, your voice is muted.
Okay, yes. Yes, in Japan, there are many discussions using DCB or DS because we do not reimburse the bilateral stenting after DCB. So many operator very discussion just after pre-dilatation. This dissection is safety to the DCB or need to stent very discussion. So the operator's preparation is very affected. So this situation.
And Dr. Kimura, you showed us the case investigated by OCT. Is that the usual practice in Japan, or do you prefer OCT over IVUS or other devices?
Yes. So OFDI can reimburse just 2 months ago. So we try to use OFDI with daily practice, but in my experience, when using SFA intervention, about 50 millimeter flash needs 1 scan. So very high dose flash need OFDI scan. So it's a disadvantage of using OFDI.
And you told us that you may see the particles of paclitaxel using OCT, right?
Yes. So
small.
small.
Time's up. Could you wrap up this symposium, Dr. Go?
Yeah. So I think our time was up. Time is up, and I think that our discussion was very educational and fruitful. So let us conclude this session. I'd like to thank to all participants in the session. Okay, bye-bye. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you.
Stay healthy. All the best. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was a great pleasure for me to join, and I hope one day I will have the possibility to be there in person.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
So
Thanks.
Always welcome.